don't know, because I can't look back.
Can we make our way to our seats and rise to honor the chairman of the
I'm good. Thank you.
great to see a faithful man. Let us pray.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله السلام عليكم. In the name of Allah, most beneficent, most merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment, the path of those whom you favor, not of those who are your anger, nor of those who go astray. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين.
I also have a list of senators, former ministers, where we have the Chief Chukodom, former Federal Minister of Environment. Yes.
At one time when I was campaigning, suddenly he said to me that I do not like him. And the rumor started gathering momentum. I was wondering how I would handle the rumor. I went to Igbo land, and I went with my son, who was the product not only of my liking him, but of my loving him. And I told him,
Yes.
after I had the public campaign outside, I met the leaders of thought, and I said, I do not know how this mischievous campaign started. So I took my son and I said, come on, speak to them in Igbo. And he did. Now, I believe that this collab will have to go to Igbo elders. And not only because it is the tradition and the culture. And Emeka, I want to thank you especially for bringing this aspect of our culture and tradition. And maybe I will have more to say about our tradition and culture when we talk about democracy later.
Eze Chidume Okoro, Inonso, Eze Chidume Okoro, Kebunye Ojikowara Mbodi, Eze Mbise.
Can somebody whisper to me
Yeah,
that?
because Kebunye Eze. Yes, Eze, but here, Kebunye Eze. Take the microphone now. I get men call say so. Can we not get him? Sorry, peterobi saying something. Can somebody find out what he's saying? Good enough. just come home.
Yeah, yes. That's part of the prayer. To give us his brief remarks. Senator Leah Limoke, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Please, can I stand up with what I think is the reason we are here? I'm going to speak very briefly, if there's such a thing as briefly, about the man, Emeka. But I know that the protocols have been heavy, but also our celebrant and his dear wife have not been introduced. So let me start by introducing our celebrant, His Excellency Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha, and his lovely wife, Ebere Ihedioha, Her Excellency. Indeed, I want to speak very briefly about a young man. I say young, he's still young at 60. But let me speak very briefly about a young man who I met well over 30 years ago. Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha, as it were, was a very young, energetic, dynamic man when I met him way back in 1992. At the time I met him, he was a very young bachelor and had graduated from university and had started work in the National Assembly. Emeka was one gentleman that was easily recognizable, not because of his stature, not because of his complexion, but because of his energy. Emeka was one man who was all over the place, all the time. And that endeared him to myself and several others. So we had this young, dynamic man who indeed, as it were, had a bright future ahead of him. But at that particular time, he was just a young boy who had become an assistant to the Senate President. But after the very short-lived tenure, Emeka continued with his vision and his focus. Emeka had a great vision, first as a media person, and he started a company called First Page Communications. And he was, if you understand Emeka, you know Emeka, you'll understand that this is one gentleman who very few people can contain. Emeka was uncontainable even then. And one day Emeka came up to me, because Emeka and I became like family and brothers. Emeka came up to me and said he wanted to get married. And I said, oh, really? At this age? You know? In fact, I would say that when I met his beautiful wife, Ebere, she struck me as just the right thing for this gentleman that had uncontrollable energy. Ebere was a very quiet, very, very humble woman, young lady then, very tall, very elegant, dark-skinned, Emeka fair-skinned. You know, just two opposites in character and in everything else. And I said, glory be to God. Emeka has someone that can contain him. Ebere was the exact opposite. But the beauty of Ebere is that in her quietness is great strength. And sometimes my friend and brother Emeka needs to be controlled. And the best person to manage Emeka at any point in time is Ebere. And so for me, I want to celebrate both of them. Emeka has grown, as it were, over the years, but not just by the grace of God, and not just by accident. Emeka is a man who I have learned lessons from. Emeka is one man who is intentional, extremely intentional. He sets his eye on a goal, and his commitment to achieving it knows no bounds. He's a gentleman who, at every point in time, would set out to achieve something that appears unattainable. But along the way, because of his commitment, his resilience, and his energy, Emeka would always achieve his vision. He's the right man to have beside you at any given time. In any political war, it's better you have Emeka on your side than on the other side. And so, for me, I've seen this, what I call a young man, when he told me he was turning 60. And he said, oh, I'm turning 60 in March. And I said to him, really? What are you doing about it? And he said, really, I haven't thought about it. I said, really? You're turning 60? And you haven't thought about it? So I started making a few suggestions. And that is how we ended up here today. But I want to say a few other things, because I don't want to talk too much about Emeka's politics. We all know about him. And it won't be right for me to focus on that. But we're going to also have a documentary that's going to be presented immediately after I speak, after which we'll invite the chairman to make his comments. It's a documentary so fascinating that in the midst of all the activities, in the midst of everything that Emeka has on his plate at any given time, he always finds time for his kids and his family. So, and his wife, who is the real mother hen, controls that section. She warns all of us, do not, you politicians, do not expose my children. I don't want my children exposed to what you guys do. And so today I'm exposing them, with your permission, madam. We need to know about this man we call Emeka. And that is my own mission. Not just to talk about his political career and his accomplishments, but indeed the human being and the fine father and gentleman that Emeka Ihedioha is. So it's on that note that I have the honor.
I'm going to offer you mine, Your Excellency. Welcome, sir.
I better take yours.
It's now off. I have to put it back on.
The little game we just play here. I took the microphone from Liel, and the lady was getting annoyed. So I decided to put down Liel's microphone. I will never want to have the fury of a lady. And because the fury of a lady can be unmanageable. Well, we have been told to keep to the protocol. But I will keep to the protocol as much as possible. But when my former vice president is here, I cannot but recognize him. Well, I cannot but also recognize Mrs. Ihedioha. We are celebrating your husband, and we are celebrating you as well. I cannot but recognize my in-law, Chief Emeka, who, when it pleases him, he wants us to play senior brother and junior brother. But it's my in-law, and he hasn't paid the dowry that he has to pay. I appreciate you. I cannot also but recognize my very good friend, in whose house history was made in this country, Chief Okeke. The Nigerian Civil War actually ended in his house, because that was where I met Philip Effiong on that fateful day. I cannot but also recognize Bishop Kuka. I understand he will be talking to us later. Bishop Kuka and I have gone a bit of a long way, but I keep telling him that I will get to the kingdom of God before him. And he keeps telling me that he has become a bishop because of me, so that I can get to the kingdom of God. Well, you will forgive me if among governors, former governors, attempted governors, I will also recognize peterobi. So let me now come back to Emeka. Emeka, I felicitate with you on this day. And I listened attentively to what Leal has said about you. And all I will say to that is that I concur.
They say you should bring the microphone closer to your mouth. We're not hearing you.
And why didn't you say it publicly so that they can hear? Why are you whispering into my ears instead of saying, bring the telephone close to your mouth so that everybody can hear you?
They said they sent your son so that you will not be angry.
Now that you have said it, what is more? You said so that I will not be angry. What is to make me angry if you are correcting me correctly? But let us have a wonderful day. You said to me we will start at 10 o'clock so that we can end at about 1 o'clock because of those who are fasting. And I don't want to take too much of your time, except to say that this is a day that we are all happy to be here with you, to celebrate with you, and to share the joy of this day with you. The little I know about you is that you are a determined man. There's no perfect human being. But the little also that I know about you, you are almost a perfect human being. Again, the little I know about you, you take things as they come. And you are unperturbed by even the seeming and apparent injustice when they come to you. For me, I will do everything to be here with you today, and you know that. And I'm really happy to be here with you. And you have chosen for discussion, which again, I believe, is an indication of your mind, of what you believe for this country. You have chosen for discussion democracy. Is it failing in Africa? Are we talking of democracy, or are we talking of Western liberal democracy? I will not preempt what Bishop Kuka will be saying. But when we talk of democracy, we should remember that in Africa, before the colonial rule and the colonial power, we have a form of government which attended to the needs of our people. And whatever you call it, to me, it is democracy. Because what is democracy about? The American President Abraham Lincoln defined it as government of the people, by the people, for the people. Democracy is meant to be a system of government that delivers, and delivers to all the people, not just a section of the people, not just a few. But what do we have today? I believe since we gone past the Greek democracy, which brought everybody to the square, and everybody has a say in the decision making, which affects everybody, or which affected everybody. Democracy has now become representative democracy. And representative democracy has not taken care of everybody. Today, we have democracy, which is government of the people, of small number of people, by a small number of people, over large number of people, who are deprived of what they need to have in life. Now, that is not democracy that will endure. So if you are talking of democracy failing in Africa, democracy in Africa has failed. And why has it failed? Because it didn't have any, in context and in content, it's not African. It does not have any aspect of our culture, our way of life, what we stand for, what we believe. Ubuntu. I am because we are. It is I am because I can grab. What sort of democracy brings you and you grab everything and then illegally, corruptly, and you say go to court. When you know that even in the court, you cannot get justice. So if democracy is not that democracy is failing, democracy is dying. And if we are going to make democracy not to die, we have to look at democracy in the context and in the content of Africa. I hope that we will get to that stage so that democracy, which will deliver, will be the democracy that we will have in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much. As the president was speaking, the former president was speaking, the former Senate President, Bayo Sanyim, joined us. Yes. The former speaker has started a war. Suffice it to say that I hear him loud and clear.
Please allow me to, in fact, I cannot stand on existing protocols because I don't want to ask for a visa before I get back to Abeokuta today. The chairman of this occasion, I have to, I'm sure you people understand me very well. Vice President represented here, the celebrant, General Obasanjo, Vice President Atiku Abubakar, and my uncle is here, you're welcome. Well, let me stand on existing protocols after that. Of course, my Ogas are here, Oga Masari and Mrs. Olukwete. I can forget about Tamboy, my junior in this business. And of course, my dear brother, you're welcome. Senator Mark, I must adopt whatever Senator David Mark has said, because as you know, he was the chairman when I was Speaker in the House, so I therefore not join any issues with him. Now, I must also clear an issue here by adopting whatever Balogun Ogogu also said. See, Osita, you are looking for trouble on this age matter. You see, officially, 92, officially. But those of us who know anything about Abeokuta, there may be an unofficial age sitting here. I said maybe. Let me just try to remember, I don't want to ask for a visa before I get back to Abeokuta, so please don't get me into trouble here. Osita, I will tell you a small story, and you can take it wherever you want to take it to. You see, in those days, some people do not require birth certificate. They will just say he was born when that church was built. He was born when that bridge was built. I'm not saying anything, no. But I'll tell you about a school in Abeokuta called Baptist Boys High School. It's a great school. My son graduated from that school a couple of years ago. I graduated from that school somewhere in the 1960-61. My grandfather graduated from that school about 15 years before General Obasanjo. If he was alive today, the man would be around 130 years old. So, I rest my case.
Determined politician who is prepared to work for this country. I will tell a very simple story, and that will conclude my message to you. When I joined politics, I was naive, coming from a military background. To me, everything was cut and dry. It's either this or that, no midway in any of the stories. So one guy came to us and he said he wanted to be a councillor. And the party executive didn't want him to be a councillor. They came to me and said the boy is useless. And I saw him as a very useful person. We dragged on and on and on. And then the boy went and bought forms. So one day, the ward chairman came to me and said, sir, you know you are backing the wrong person. I said, why? He said, the boy's name is not even in our register. He's not a member of our party. How can he be a councillor under our party? So I told him, I said, I called the boy, and the boy produced PDP membership card. So the boy said I should call for the register. I told the ward chairman, I said, okay, tomorrow bring the register. So he said, okay. He brought the ward register, and lo and behold, the boy's name was not there. Then the boy came and said, I saw the register, my name is in it. You know what the ward chairman did? He bought a new foolscap paper and produced new register, and the boy's name was simply omitted from it. And so the boy wasn't in the register. Well, he was a determined boy. He went back and started campaign again, and then eventually was elected a councillor. So Emeka is a very determined person. His short period in Imo witnessed a lot of development. He has gone back to the trench. He's doing his best. In the next election, he will be the governor of Imo State. Thank you. Your Excellency, the former president.
I would call him in popular parlance, Emeka, is a man who has, in his signature green heart, achieved things that we should be celebrating on his 60th birthday. As we heard, he was a member of the House of Representatives for 12 years, rising to become the Deputy Speaker from 2011 to 2015. And he also served as the Executive Governor of Imo State from 2019 to 2020. The theme of this colloquium is democracy. Is it failing in Africa? I think it's important to recognize the essence. What is the essence of democracy? And to recognize the essence of democracy, I think we should go back to its origin. Democracy, originating from a Greek word, was in fact, in its essence, the transfer of power which occurred in 508 BC, when the Greek statesman Cleisthenes transferred power in the ancient Greek city-state of Athens, which up to that time, up to 508 BC, was ruled by an oligarchic aristocracy. Cleisthenes thought that power should be exercised by the citizens of the society, and so he founded democracy. And since then, we have had all sorts of definitions of democracy, but as we were reminded by President Obasanjo, democracy in its essence was actually defined by Abraham Lincoln, who lived between 1809 and 1865, it was Abraham Lincoln who said that the essence of democracy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. When the celebrant came to invite me to this colloquium, he asked me to tell the story of my role in promoting democracy in Africa. And so I'd like to tell you that when I was elected Commonwealth Secretary General in 1989, I pledged to the heads of government of the Commonwealth who elected me, that my mission would be threefold. First, to make the Commonwealth a potent force for promoting democracy and human rights. And second, to try, in the words of the great Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, to seek to bring a healing touch to conflicts within and between Commonwealth member countries. And thirdly, to promote technical cooperation among Commonwealth countries for development. At the beginning of my tenure as Secretary General, there were 10 Commonwealth countries that were clearly non-democratic. They were countries that were under either one-party rule or under military rule. And my first attention was to try and persuade those countries that were under one-party rule to become multi-party democracies. So I went, after long conversations with President Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, with President Hastings Banda of Malawi, with President Albert Roni of the Seychelles, and with President Arap Moi of Kenya, I persuaded them to move from one-party state to a multi-party state. And in fact, in the case of Kenya, I sent a foremost Nigerian constitutional lawyer, the late Professor Ben Wabueze, to Kenya to help the Kenya government adapt its constitution from that which served one-party state to a multi-party state constitution. And then I believe that perhaps the most notable of my role was my seminal part in the transition from apartheid to democracy in South Africa. Briefly here, I would tell you that in November 1991, I went to South Africa and met with the last white president of South Africa, F.W. de Klerk. And I told him that I had come to see how the Commonwealth could help him in the conference which he had proposed, a conference between his government and the anti-apartheid political parties in South Africa. And that conference began on December 1, 1991. And I sent to that conference 6 eminent Commonwealth statesmen and women to be at the conference. And when the deliberations of the conference were threatened because of the massacre by apartheid police of 4 ANC stalwarts in a place called Boipatong, the conference was threatened. I flew to South Africa and I had meetings with the President, F.W. de Klerk, with the leader of the ANC, Mandela, with the leader of the PAC, Clarence Makwetu, and with the leader of the Afrikaner Party, General Constant Viljoen. For a while, I could not find Gacha Buthelezi, who was the leader of the IFP. And if I may tell you an amusing story here, when I sent my staff to Ulundi, the capital of KwaZulu-Natal, where Gacha Buthelezi normally lived, and they could not find him. I went to State President F.W. de Klerk, and I said to him, I'm sure that your Secret Service would know the movement of Gacha Buthelezi. Could you tell me where he is? And President F.W. de Klerk said to me, Mr. Secretary General, Buthelezi is in the Holiday Inn in Pretoria under the name of Mr. Rogers. So I dialed the Holiday Inn myself. I didn't ask my secretary or my staff to call the Holiday Inn. I called the Holiday Inn, and the switchboard answered, and I said, could you put me through to Mr. Rogers? And they put me through. And of course, I recognized immediately Gacha Buthelezi's voice. But I did say, is that Mr. Rogers? He said, yes. Who is it? And I said, Gacha is your brother chief here. And he shouted and said, how did you know where I am? And I said, in my position, you shouldn't be surprised that I'll be able to find out where you are. And I had a meeting with him because I prepared a one-page accord which I got the president and the leaders of the four main parties to sign, an accord to prevent or at least minimize violence in South Africa. And I sent some senior representatives of the Commonwealth to go to South Africa, and their presence helped to douse the violence. And furthermore, I organized a contingent of 26 policemen and women from over the Commonwealth, including Nigeria. The man who ended up as IG in Nigeria, Etim Inyang, was among the 26 policemen and women that I sent to South Africa. And their mission was to help the South Africa police, which had been used only to policing protests of anti-apartheid protesters and fighters, to help to teach them the techniques of community policing, and that they did. And mindful of the time, I'd like to say that I also sent a team of Commonwealth electoral experts to go to help South Africa Electoral Commission in organizing the elections that ushered in democracy in South Africa in 1994. And during the two-year period, almost 2 years, that the conference at Kempton Park lasted, I visited South Africa very many times, and indeed I was present on November 17th at 3:30 a.m. when the conference ended with an agreement on the elections and the installation of a democratic government after the elections. I remember very vividly the quite emotional occasion of Nelson Mandela being sworn in as the president of South Africa. Many in the audience there had tears in their eyes. And another, I must say that I remain grateful to South African government for honoring me doubly for this role. First, by giving me the rare honor of inviting me to address a joint session of South African Parliament in 1995. The highest South African national honor for non-South Africans, the Supreme Companion of OR Tambo Gold. Again in pursuit of democracy. In 1997, I convened a meeting of all the heads of government presidents of the 19 African members of the Commonwealth at the time. Of course, that did not include Nigeria, because Nigeria then was under suspension following the execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa and his colleagues, despite the desperate personal appeals by Nelson Mandela and myself to General Abacha. And what emerged from their discussions was that one of the biggest challenges faced in African countries in their democracy is the management of diversity. As you know, African countries were lumped together in terms of different ethnic nationalities by the Europeans in their conference in Berlin in 1884, 1885, that paid no regard to the cohesion of the ethnic nationalities. And so the management of diversity is a big challenge to African democracies, including here in Nigeria. Management of diversity is one of our biggest challenges. And as I have said, our founding fathers recognized the significance of management of diversity in agreeing the essentials of our 1960-63 Constitution. I don't believe, as I have said on many occasions, that our current Constitution of 1999 can address that subject. We need a different Constitution from what we have at the moment. And I must say that the country's management of diversity is, of course, a common challenge to democracies all over the world. But those countries that succeeded in remaining individual political entities, notwithstanding their diversity, have been countries that adopted truly federal constitutions. True federalism is the answer to the management of diversity. And true federalism means leaving at the center powers for managing the national issues, but giving the subnational entities enough power to look after their development and look after their internal security. I believe that the recent military coup d'etats in Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger are very worrying signals, because they tend to go back, take Africa back to the 1960s, 70s, when the anti-apartheid South African author, Ruth First, in her book, The Barrel of a Gun, said that an American Secretary of State said that he could not remember the number of times when he was woken up at night and told of yet another coup d'etat in an African country whose name sounded like a typographical error. And finally, I'd like to mention another challenge to our democracy in Nigeria, and that is the nature of our politics and the nature of the conduct of our politicians. Our political parties are not, as they should be, ideologically based. They are, on the whole, instruments for capturing political power. And that's a challenge to our democracy. And if I may conclude with one statement, I would say that it's only through stable democratic governance which would facilitate indigenous creativity and manufacturing that will, both in Nigeria and in African countries, be able to rid our continent of internal conflicts and lack of substantial socioeconomic development. Because these are the two factors that impede Africa's ability to change what is generally a Eurocentric narrative of Africa and the black people. A narrative that is the basis of racism and the looking down on Africans by other races. I believe that Nigeria, with its known attributes, has a special responsibility in changing this Eurocentric narrative. And I go on to remember a story told in 1971 at a Commonwealth meeting by late Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew said that in the 40s, cheap and inefficient gadgets were generally described as China or Japan. But since the 1940s, because China and Japan embraced development, industrial development, that description of inefficient gadgets stopped. And so we in Africa, and particularly we in Nigeria, have the responsibility of having a stable democracy which would enable our people to create and to manufacture. And by that, we would help to change the Eurocentric narrative of Africa and the black people. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, another round of applause for you.